Hi, in this tutorial I will show you how to paint this sunset pier. You will need a 3/4 inch flat brush, the colors light blue violet, titanium white, medium magenta, and cobalt blue hue. You will need other colors too, but we're going to start with these four because we're going to paint the entire canvas. We're going to paint the sky and also the lake at the same time. So because we're filling up a very large space, this entire canvas with color, I'm going to just start by applying a nice even layer of water to the canvas. So I'm just using my 3/4 inch flat wash brush and I'm applying left and right strokes of this water. So not soaking wet, but pretty damp. And this is going to help the first layer of the colors just kind of spread faster and more smoothly. And also the base, the sky and the water is kind of a light, thin layer in the design of this painting. Okay, so I know that went really fast and feel free to press pause, but I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I am going to dip my brush in light blue violet. So my brush is still wet, I didn't dry it off, and I'm going to apply that light blue violet to the top. So we're doing a gradient of all these colors, and we're starting with the light blue violet at the top. And I'm going to go down about 4 fingers. So when the paint is applied on the canvas, obviously the water is allowing it to run a little bit. And I'm doing my canvas flat on the table. If you notice that yours is starting to drip a little bit, you might want to kind of lay it flat. So you can see how far I went down there, about 4 fingers. And we're going to not rinse the brush and we're going to dip it in the titanium white. So we're doing a gradient. That means that the color is going to fade to a new color. And in order for it to fade to a new color, we got to blend it back into the color that we applied on the canvas. So I'm using this white and I am gently letting it blend into that blue. And you can see how I almost go all the way up with that blend. And it goes from a pure form of that blue violet, and then it gets very light to almost white on the bottom. And then I am going as far down as pretty much to half of the canvas. So if I measured the canvas right now, where the half point is, that's pretty much how far I am going down. And then I'm going back in and just kind of blending it in there. Okay. So you can do this if you want to, if it kind of helps you out, but I've grabbed my ruler to show you. So the canvas is 7 inches, 7.5 inches because it is a, I'm sorry, 5.5 inches because the canvas is 11 inches high by 14. It's 11 by 14 canvas. So half of 11 is 5.5. So that is the halfway point. Okay. So right at the halfway point, we're going to apply the medium magenta. Again, did not rinse my brush. Pretty much not rinsing my brush at all here. So the medium magenta is going to be part of the gradient. So that white is going to fade to medium magenta. And I'm going to very gently blend this up into the white here. I'm not going to make it consistent all the way across because it is a sunset, and sunsets are not a perfect gradient in nature in the sky. It's kind of a blend where it's not going to be blended perfectly in some areas. So maybe I'll add a little bit more white in here on the right side and just kind of gently blending it up. That pink will take over if you add too much pink, and then it'll turn your white into mostly pink. So I really like the look of that white, and I don't want to get rid of that white right there. So just making it very gentle. And then of course, so that halfway point is the horizon line, and that's where I wanted that pink to be brightest. And also it's dipping underneath the horizon line because we are also painting the water. Okay, so there's pink in the water, so adding the pink a little bit under the horizon line is going to allow that pink to show up in the water. Okay, so now I got a little bit of pink under the horizon line and I grabbed the white. So we are going backwards in the gradient now. So now that we're in the water area, so it's going to go from magenta to white to light blue violet to cobalt blue on the very bottom. And that's what I'm going to do here. I'm doing a continuing the gradient. And then also, so at this point, your canvas, when we applied the water in the beginning, the canvas is probably mostly dry by now. So you can reload and reapply the water there, or you can just dip your brush in the water a little bit to get that paint to flow. So just grab a little bit of water and make sure it's not dripping or anything, and then apply it. Okay, so now I'm at the light blue violet. So I'm gently applying that. Okay, and remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's nature. And in fact, this is the third time I'm doing this painting, and each time my gradient looked slightly different. So your colors will come out different. That's just how it goes in painting. No two paintings are ever alike. And that just goes with the territory here with teaching painting. So yours may not look exactly like mine, and that is okay. Okay, so I'm at the point where I'm mostly doing the pure form of the light blue violet, and I'm going almost all the way down. I did mention that the cobalt blue, that blue color that we have not used yet, is going to be on the bottom. Okay, so what I'm doing here is, because this bottom is all dried, I actually added a little bit of water there first, even though it turned kind of bluish because my paintbrush was not clean. That's what I did. And so I'm doing cobalt blue hue on the very bottom. This is the only part that color shows up in the painting, is at the bottom of the water. Okay, and I'm blending it up. Cobalt blue hue is a very strong color, so you want to gently blend that in. It's pure on the bottom, but we still want to blend it into the light blue violet, which is the color that's next to it. And you see me kind of brush the sides. This is a canvas panel. Doesn't have the sides on the canvas. It's a board. So the paint gets kind of clumped up on the sides. So I just kind of grab it a little bit when it does that. Okay. I am going to go back and rinse my brush off. I'm just going to add a bit more of the light blue violet at the top. It was a little bit too thin for my liking right there at the top. So just wanted a more pure form of the light blue violet way up here. Totally not necessary if yours did not do that, but it's something that I chose to do just now. Okay, there's our gradient of all of the colors. And what we're going to do next, so we need this painting to dry. I'm using a hair dryer to dry the painting, but you can take a break, you can wave your painting around, get it completely dry, because we're going to do the next layer on this painting. I'm actually going to use chalk to define my horizon line, and this is helpful because it kind of gives us a better understanding of, we have to define the sky and define the water. So I'm using my T-square ruler, and you can measure it exactly, or you can estimate it, but it is exactly at half of the canvas, so 5.5 inches. If you're using 11 by 14 canvas. Okay, so just use the piece of chalk and draw a horizon line. And this chalk will go away as we paint the mountains. It will disappear. Okay, so next we're going to paint the mountains, and I'm going to switch to a number 12 flat brush. So it's a smaller brush than that 3/4 inch I've been using, and I'm going to mix a color on my palette, and it's going to be kind of a watered down color. So I'm going to mix cobalt blue with a little bit of black. And I grabbed a little bit too much black here, so I'm going to go on the side here. I want this color to be a dark blue. So it's cobalt blue with a little bit of black, kind of watered down to an ink consistency. So these mountains are going to be the very, very far mountains. And so I'm just going to use my brush to freehand a lumpy line and paint that in with the number 12 flat brush. And the line is going to dip down to the bottom of the horizon line. So it's taller on the left and right sides, and it slants down to the very bottom of that line. And then it kind of does a mirror effect on the other side. So it starts out very low in the middle, and then it gets higher on the sides. And I am doing 2 layers of mountains here. So this is the back layer. The further mountains way in the back are lighter. And then when I'm ready to do the second layer of mountain, that layer will be it will be pure Mars black. So I just kind of paint a lumpy line with the tip of my brush and just kind of fill it in. And then where you see that part in the middle where it's dipped down, that's where we're going to put the sun. And we're not going to do the sun yet, but that's just where the sun is going to go. And then, so when I'm done filling in these mountains, I'm going to do the reflection in the water here. Okay, reflection time. So I'm going to use the same color and mirror that right into the water, slightly more watered down than the mountain layer. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of this is symmetry here. It's the exact mirror of the shape of the mountain. It dips down in the middle. And you can see how this reflection over here on the left is more translucent because I watered down the paint just a bit more there. If you don't like the watering down thing, you don't need to do that. You can use that color and not water it down. You can still create the illusion of the mountain reflecting in the water. And then I'm just adding another coat of the paint on the mountain right there. Okay, so I'm going to set this brush aside and I'm going to get a pouncer. It is a round sponge, and I'm going to use that round sponge to paint the sun. So here's my pouncer, and it is round, and it is kind of a medium shape. It's I linked it in the blog post, but that's the Martha Stewart brand of pouncers. I use these mostly for suns lately because it creates a nice perfect circle. So I'm just going to use my board here that I'm painting on and apply primary yellow and titanium white. So primary yellow and titanium white. So yellow and white, and I'm just going to add a nice a lot of that to that sponge and make it nice and even. Make sure it's all covered on the sponge and that the sides aren't really goopy, meaning there's not a lot of paint gooped up on the sides. So it's nice even on the sun, the circle. And then I am going to, with a steady hand, press and kind of twist it a little bit so that I get my circle. Okay, and it is nice and opaque because for one, there's a lot of paint on that sponge, so it's nice and thick, but also that the white and yellow make for a nice opaque yellow instead of a translucent yellow. So then you can kind of use your finger just to kind of spread the paint around. Mine had little tiny bubbles because of the sponge, so I just kind of smoothed that out a little bit. And I didn't talk about the location of the sun. So pretty much the bottom of that circle is hugging that horizon line. It is right there touching that horizon line. Of course, it might overlap that back mountain a bit, but we are going to make up for that because we're going to do another layer of mountain that will slightly overlap that sun. So I am back to my number 12 flat brush, and I'm going to use only Mars Black this time to paint a second layer of mountains. So this mountain that I'm going to paint is shorter than the mountain range in the back because it is closer. So the mountain range in the back is lighter, it's far away, and also it's lighter because that sun is hitting those mountains way in the back and it's making it look lighter. And this one is darker because it's closer. And I covered more of that back mountain range than I wanted to, so it was kind of an oops for me. So it might be kind of confusing what I'm doing, but ideally I wanted this black mountain range to be shorter, a lot shorter than the lighter colors, so you can kind of see the depth in that, but oh well. That's just what happened there. And then I want it to overlap the sun a bit, so of course that yellow is nice and thick, so it's going to drag into that black, and I'm not patient. I didn't wait for that yellow to dry. I could have grabbed my hair dryer and dried it real quick, but I did not. So if the yellow kind of drags in with the black, that's okay. Kind of makes it look like maybe there's some yellow in the mountain range too. So, but just go over the bottom part of the sun, so it looks like the sun is starting to dip below the horizon line, or dip behind the mountains. Okay, so now that we have this mountain range, I am going to mirror it into the water, and I watered down that black just slightly there. So I'm going to paint the opposite in the water as well. And I'm going to go silent here for just a few seconds while I fill in this bottom part of the reflection. Okay, next we're going to get all of that black off of that number 12 brush. In fact, ideally what you should do, and what I did do, is rinse out that water. That water is very black. Rinse it all out, get it nice and clear. But I did not do that, so do as I do, or do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. But we're doing the reflection of the sun in the water. So we have the number 12 brush dipped in the white and yellow, so I just used the same whatever was left from using the sponge, and I'm going to do horizontal strokes all the way, or almost all the way down. So this is water right here. It's going to start out, it's going to almost form a triangle shape here. So these are all little horizontal strokes. It doesn't have to be a perfect triangle, just kind of resembling a triangle shape, but it starts out thicker at the top, and then it gets kind of, as it goes down, it gets more narrower. And that's all it is, just little horizontal strokes here. And that is the reflection of the sun in the water. Don't worry about your pier, because yes, that pier is going to be covering up part of the reflection, and that is okay. So we're not worrying about that right now. Okay, so now I'm going to rinse my brush off again, and I'm going to do some blue water lines, so I guess we can call it lake texture in the water. So I'm going to rinse my brush off, and I'm going to use the color Cobalt Blue. I'm going to add some fresh Cobalt Blue to my palette because the other one has dried out a bit too much. And so use the 12 brush, and we're going to make little horizontal lines of the Cobalt Blue pretty much everywhere, especially over the reflection. So the reflection is part of the water. It would have water lines, so we may not see it because it's dark, but I did it in that area, and just a few ones that are actually in the middle where the sun is. So if you're kind of scared to put blue lines over your yellow reflection, you don't need to do it. I did it very, very slightly. There's not a lot of paint on the tip of my brush, so I'm holding this brush very lightly. These lines are not bold. They're light, feathery lines, very thin because I'm using the tip of my brush. So we don't want to do too many, but just about a medium amount of lines, just to let it look like there is water texture in this lake. And technically, you can actually do this painting without the lines. You can just leave it like it is if you don't like the look of the blue lines. So you can leave that out if you wish. So we want this to dry next. And mine is pretty dry. So I'm going to show you. So we're going to do the dock next. And I'm going to use chalk. This is another painting that I did of this design to show you. But the dock itself is about, and I didn't measure this is just my guess, it's about 7 inches wide on the bottom, and the top part, so I did 2 little dots with my chalk. The top part is about 4 fingers high, so you can see how I'm just kind of estimating the size there. So I'm going to draw a trapezoid here, and I'm using the chalk, and I did 3 little marks on my canvas. So on the bottom I did 2 marks that are about 7 inches wide, and then I did 1 mark that is about 4 fingers high at the top. Okay, so I am drawing a very basic shape. This is a trapezoid, so we got these 2 diagonal lines there, and they are going to go to a horizontal line at the top. So we have 2 diagonal lines, horizontal line, and of course that horizontal line is less than 7 inches to make that trapezoid shape. Okay, so all we did was draw a very basic trapezoid, and I'm going to fill in this trapezoid with Mars black. So I'm using a number 12 flat brush, Mars black, and I am going to paint the trapezoid in. Okay, so I mean the dock itself looks hard, but really it isn't. When I did this painting, I was a little intimidated at first. I thought, "Ooh, this is going to be too hard to do." But once I got going and realized that that's just a trapezoid, and the poles are just 3 vertical lines, and it's actually quite simple, and it looks really cool over the lake. So I hope that you find it easy too, hopefully. Okay, so I am filling in my dock with the Mars black. And I'm going to go silent here for a moment while I do that. One tip that I would like to give you is really make those lines very sharp, meaning very straight. Using the tip of your brush, define those lines. They should be very crisp and not loopy or anything. It is a dock, so the diagonal line is not a wavy line. It is very straight, so as straight as you can. Of course, we're freehanding it, so that's not entirely possible to be completely perfect. Okay, so all right, I'm gonna do a little bit of texture here on my dock, and I dipped my brush in titanium white, and I'm just gonna kind of gently, of course that black is not dry, so that white is just kind of blending in to make this grayish color. But I'm eventually going to add brown into that, but I'm not going to worry too much about details yet, because I am going to move on and do those vertical beams next. Okay, so I have my first layer of a little bit of indication of texture, that white just kind of blended in. So it's not solid black now, it's got a little tiny bit of white texture in there that's blended in with the black. Okay, so next I'm going to grab a special kind of brush, and this is a chisel brush. I think it's the first time I've ever used it in a tutorial, but I found it helpful, and I have a picture of it on my blog. I didn't really show you that much in this video what it looks like. I didn't really demonstrate it, but it is a short flat brush, and that's not very wide. I'm going to use that brush to do vertical pulls. So this is just the Mars black, and all I did was do 1 stroke, and there is my vertical beam. So over here at the edge of the dock, so we have 2 lines, 2 strokes here, And I imagine it's about a half an inch high, maybe close to 3/4 inches high. Okay, so and then I'm gonna do one in the middle, and this one in the middle is slightly higher. And imagine if there's like a invisible diagonal line that is going on the top of these poles. They would kind of line up. So there's the one on the bottom, so this one is higher. So I'm just using the full width of the brush to paint these, and make sure that you're forcing them to go vertical, so don't make them go diagonal. Look at the edge of your canvas, so that's our kind of a caliber to what vertical is, so make sure it's going in the direction of vertical. So if you look at the side of the canvas, it's going vertical, and it will create that illusion of the beams being at the edge of the dock, and that there's some depth in the painting with the beams going in the distance. So I'm going to do the same thing. It's a mirrored effect on the right side. So same height. I'm doing exactly 3. So the smallest one is in the back, the kind of medium one is in the middle, and then the kind of tall one is in the front with an invisible diagonal line where they line up. So it's actually pretty simple, just as long as you're forcing your stroke to go vertical. It might seem kind of awkward to paint it vertical, like you're kind of feel like you want to do it diagonal, but you don't. It's got to be exactly vertical for it to work. And then I do mention this in the text of the instructions for this, but if you don't have a chisel brush or you're not willing to just go out and buy one, it's probably like $3 or $4 at Michael's. But this, you can use a round brush for this. You can use your bright brush. You use any flat brush. I just happened to grab this one because it was the right width and just kind of perfect for these beams. But definitely you do not have to go out and buy a special brush just for the beams of this painting unless you want to. So on my palette now, I'm using the color raw umber and white. So the raw umber is on my palette and also the white, so I'm double loading it in raw umber and white, and I'm adding some more texture into this. And you can see I'm just kind of blending the colors on the canvas and doing these horizontal lines and just kind of making it look rustic and unblended. So I'm using the black is still slightly wet, so it's still kind of blending in, but I want it to look a little bit more dark brown than black on this dock, and doing that with the raw umber and the whites. I'm also going to do a highlight line on the inside of the beams. So I'm going to use titanium white, and on the very inside, so imagine the sun is hitting the poles and we see the light on the inside. So I'm just doing a line on the inside with that white, letting it blend in with the black, and then I'm going back over it so that white isn't as strong, so that it blends back in. So I can grab a little bit of the black or the raw umber and just get it to blend in a little bit. It makes it look a little bit more realistic, makes those beams look like they have depth to it. And then when I'm done with that, I can go back in. If you see some chalk still, you can get a wet paintbrush and just kind of gently erase that chalk away. Or you can wait till the very end of the painting and get rid of the chalk lines that you may see. Okay, so I'm done with the dock, and I am going to do a silhouette of the grass and some cattails on the bottom of the painting. So use a I started with the bright, so I'm using the number 12 flat brush and Mars Black that is just slightly watered down. I ended up switching to a round brush because this bright brush was a little too large for this kind of detailed work here. But I'm using the tip of the brush to paint the grass blades, but you'll see me here in a second switching to the round brush. I kind of recommend the round brush because it's smaller, but I'm just doing grass blades on the bottom of the painting. So here I am switching to that round brush, and I'm just doing getting my Mars Black kind of freshened there. but little grass blades on the bottom of the painting. And then some of the grass blades, they're going all different angles. Some have little cattail shapes on them. Some are kind of bent. So I'm going to go silent here as I do that. Okay, next we're going to do the tree branches. So I am going to go back to my number 12 flat brush, and I am going to use the colors Mars Black and Raw Umber. So I am actually going to dip my brush in both of those colors. Grabbing my number 12, loading both Mars Black and Raw Umber on my brush. This is so it makes not black, not brown, but a very dark brown. And I didn't even mix the two colors together. It's double loaded and it's going to mix when we paint. So here's my branch. I started out wide, so I use the full width of the brush and then I twist my brush to make a point. That is how I like to do my branches. So they're thicker and then they get thin on the edge, and I'm using the tip of my brush to make it to a Y, and then I'm going to do another branch. It's kind of sticking out here, using the tip of the brush to get it to be thin, and a branch that's kind of hanging down here. So when you want your branch to be thicker, you apply more pressure to the brush, and then when you want it to be thinner, you twist it on its side and you let go and you use lighter pressure. So you're starting out with kind of heavy pressure and it gets thinner. This branch on the left, I like the look of it dipping down really low to almost the bottom of the painting here. So I made this branch lower, and I didn't want it exactly symmetrical with the branch on the right, so I did that. And then I did a few branches kind of hanging off, kind of just let it guide you. Don't think about it too much. But if you notice, the tip of all these branches create the letter Y. So when a branch goes to a tip, it branches off into two different sections, so it creates like a letter Y. We don't want to do too many branches. We don't want to make it look too busy. So you decide how many. I'm going to make one just kind of going off the canvas here. Then maybe some of the branches are a little bit thicker, closer to the main branch. And then what I'm going to do next is completely optional. I don't think I even put this in the directions of the painting. It's a little extra, but I just grabbed titanium white, so now it's gray, and adding just a bit of texture into those branches, just kind of letting that white blend in a little bit. Don't do too much. We don't want to make it bright. These branches should be dark, but the white adds a tiny bit of gray texture to those branches. So, now that we're done with the branches, we're going to completely rinse that brush off. We're going to set it to the side, and I am going to use my round brush next. We're going to do the little cherry blossoms. This is the best part, or my favorite part of the painting, actually. So I'm going to load my palette with quinacridone magenta. This is the first time we're using that color in this painting. Medium magenta, titanium white. So those three colors are the three colors that I am using in my blossoms. And the round brush. So using the number 4 round brush, and all I'm doing are little clusters of dots. I am using all three colors, so I'm dipping it interchangeably into the colors. I don't need to rinse my brush between dipping the colors. I am just grabbing the colors. I am not thinking right now what colors I'm grabbing. I'm just kind of letting the painting lead the way without me thinking too hard, but doing little clusters of dots on the tips of the branches. So If you're not new to my tutorials, you know that I have quite a few cherry blossom paintings actually, where I do the same thing with the round brush and I do the little dots. So that's what I'm doing here in this piece as well. So we don't want everything to look the same color everywhere. So some clusters might look lighter, some clusters might look darker in some areas. And then in a little bit, I'll be doing some dots that are kind of hanging down because, of course, some blossoms would be falling off the tree. We would have little dots on the dock and in the water. So I will should demonstrate that as well. And my painting is speeding up here. So there's my little dots on the dock. But my painting's speeding up because this part does take a long time. It's a little tedious. I think it's super relaxing and you get into your zen at this point when you're doing the little dots. So that's why it's going fast. And actually, I'm going to leave you silent here for a bit while I finish up this part. Okay, so the final step of this painting is a cute little silhouette of a duck over here. I'm doing this one over here on the right. I did another painting of this and the duck was on the left. So you decide where you want to put the duck. But I recommend drawing it first. I'm using a yellow color pencil only because that color pencil shows up against the blue. I'm looking at a picture of a silhouette of a duck. So I just went on Google Images, looked for one that I liked, and I am drawing it on the canvas with my color pencil. This is a Prismacolor pencil, and I find that it does erase. So if you mess up, at least this brand of color pencil uses just a regular eraser and it erases. I did not draw it with chalk because the chalk was too thick, so that's why I'm using a color pencil to draw my duck in. And I am doing that right now, so just drawing my duck on the canvas so that it is sitting in the water. Okay, and then I'm going to grab my 10-0 liner brush. So I wouldn't use the 4 round brush because the 4 round brush is too thick. So get your 10-0 liner. This is the only time I'm using that tiny round brush, the 10-0 liner in this painting. And I am going to do that and the Mars black to paint my duck silhouette in. So that's what I'm doing here. And then I found that as I painted this duck in, I kind of altered the shape just slightly with the black. And then in the end, I ended up having to erase some of the leftover color pencil. And it worked. Once that black was dry, I was able to completely erase that yellow color pencil with a normal eraser. That part actually doesn't show up on the video, but you'll see in the end how that yellow line just suddenly disappears. Okay, so that's all I'm doing. I'm painting in my duck here with that 10-0 liner. And I'm going to go silent here for a few seconds. Okay, so for the ripple effect, I started out with black and I just kind of painted this ripple, started with the black, but then I am rinsing my brush off now, and I'm going to use titanium white because I like the look of the white in the ripple instead of the black. So all I'm doing is painting my water line that's kind of surrounding the duck, so it's just a line that kind of radiates out from the duck and like a ripple in the water, and it kind of flows and curves out a bit, and it's just where the duck is. Maybe I'm just going to kind of compensate with the fact that I'm using white, just a few white lines above the duck, but that's it. I'll leave that still for you so you can see how it looks. And here's the off-camera part I was talking about. I used the eraser to erase the leftover yellow lines. And that's it. That is the finish of the painting. So sign your name, show it off. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I love this painting. It is one of my favorites. Every time I look at it, I think I would like to be sitting on that dock at this moment. Thank you for watching.